Welcome back to Super Buddies Forever, dorm room building forever after high. If you've had the nerve to come see this with the time frame, part 3, I applaud you. In the description below will be jump points if you just need to get to a specific part. So let's move on with the final stuff for making these rooms. Now, because I'm doing ever after high dorm rooms, I want them very specific and very much the same so it goes along with the theme. So now I have to sort out exactly where I'm placing everything. This is also going to give me areas to put my glue. So if I'm using paper, I can hide the dimples that the glue makes. If you're just joining us, you can check the links down below for step 1 and 2. 1 deals with how I made this box and got it to this point with my crude drawing, and number 2 deals with budgeting and supplies. In thinking ahead, I now have my spaces completely, perfectly marked out where I want them. I've taken a picture of this to remind me of where I put it. So I will only put glue around the edges of the room and then within my red spots to hide the dimples and to give me a solid area in which to stick the items on. Other areas here that will be covered can also be areas for gluing without ruining the rest of your wall. This way, things that are attached will also not pull away and pull the paper away from the box. This is an example of where the window is going to go, and now you can have a perfect visual on seeing where it is, what my marks mean, and this is all going to pertain to the future. Here is the valance, and now I know where that goes. That especially is going to have a little bit of weight, so I want to be sure that has a solid foundation to stick to. Here is my cute little doors, and don't forget I will be showing you different options on how to make all of these items as well for a more practical price. Again, because we're doing ever after high, my door measurement and where I want it is super important. I decided to put in the middle so I can use the left and right as areas for any other decoration or furniture I might want to put. If you were doing Bratz, Barbie, or Monster High and the dorm room theme wasn't so important, then this part isn't as important to you. But still planning ahead for your bed area and windows is important. So here I'm showing a perfect visual again on where the bed will be, so you can see that you can hide the glue behind it. This spot also, I know I'm going to have a side table, and you can, I hope, kind of get why this step is important for thinking ahead. Of course, because I am doing the roommates, I will make sure I copy all of this on the opposite roommate's room's room and make that all match. You can look down below, don't forget, for jump points if you just want to see a certain thing. Finally, gluing on paper. At this point, I was so excited after doing so much front end work to finally get to paper. I have a preference for 3 pieces for the walls. If you look at these scrapbooking books, they usually only come in 2. But if you look and peek around, sometimes you'll find the books like this which actually have 3 pieces of paper for each. Super handy, super affordable. I am beginning with my ceiling piece. I made a dot in the center, finding my center using my ruler, making an X when they meet. I now have my center for the ceiling light. I also did that on my paper. Here's that dent I was talking about. Otherwise, I would have painted the ceiling, but that wasn't going to look very good. I had around these things for a ceiling light that I want to also use for ever after high, but I've yet to find one I like. So using these, I diverted to doing Blondie for this example room. Here's a handy idea. If you need your glue to always stay at the tip and be easy, put it in a cup. So here I put a little dot of glue in the middle to match up with the other stuff. And then I put little dots, because it's the ceiling and will hang, I put 4 simple dots in the middle, but not too much because there's no doubt this is going to have dimples. This will minimize the dimples we will have showing in this ceiling. For the purpose of this example, I am also using paper on everything except for the floor, just to show you how that looks. My intention and what I've bought that you've seen from my materials list is actually cardstock. So this is not going to have to be as much of a worry. But looking at this, you can make it happen with it looking very professional and very well done, because your dimples will be at a minimum. When you put the glue under it and smooth it, don't press too hard. If you press too hard, you'll actually make the dimples worse. Now I'll be attaching the back walls. You can perfectly see now where the glue, and I hope it all comes together on why I took time in the beginning for this. You can see where the glue is exactly where it should be, where it will be hidden. Now I'm doing this order, the ceiling first, to bring in the walls for a particular reason. When I lay it in, push it smoothly, I'm trying to make sure that top portion of the wall meeting the ceiling is very neat. So if you decide your budget can't handle having the crown trim, if you make that as neat as possible, you can do really well not to actually need the crown trim. I am sure at this point you are mostly getting the idea of why I'm putting the glue where I'm putting it. But I'm a visual person, so I'm going to show it fully because that's how I like to learn. I do well with pictures. So obviously my door, I put a lot of glue behind the door so the door won't pull away. When I match up here, I'm matching up the back wall to the wall. I want that to be neat. And of course, I'm checking on that ceiling. Any mistakes or any excess or anything, if I haven't tested at the bottom, can easily be covered with the bottom sheet. So I don't have to worry about the bottom as much as I do the top to make the end product look as best as possible. Always take your time and try to do the best you can. My mom always taught me. I love that trait. My last wall. Remember from step 1, I have that little flap in the boxes I was able to get. So my planning was super important because of that flap and making sure that hides. I know I'm going to have a ridge there. I can't avoid it with the box I have. So I'm being perfectly sure to put some extra glue here. And I've done all my planning around that flap. So therefore the bed will cover that. And of course on the door, when you've seen that, that is nice and smooth. Here I'll do the same thing I did with the other side. Make sure my ceiling is nice. And of course when I do this Blondie's roommate, I will make sure I do everything exactly opposite on the other box. The last piece, the floor, I used cardstock. It was a little too big, so I had to cut the edges a little bit to make it fit. Unfortunately, I cut it just a titch too small. So I have to accommodate that. It happens. I'm making sure this piece, when I put it in, it looks good in the front. It's not hanging off so I don't snag it. And I'm kind of making it as middle as I can where I made my mistake. But it's not too bad because I have baseboard trim, which is imperative to my continuity in these dorms. So I'm going to be able to cover that really well. In the end, I will put some Mod Podge to seal it since this doesn't have a shiny, durable surface. Here is the glue lines I did for the floor. Because I did cardstock, I didn't have to put the 4 dabs in, but if you were doing paper, I highly suggest you do that. And of course, you can hide some underneath the bed. So I've placed this in here. I'm doing the same thing I've done with everything else. I'm trying to get my little mistakes as middle even as I can to make it look well. Luckily, if things show here, you're going to have items and furniture covering it. So most important, you get your ceiling the best you can compared to your floor. Your floor has some room for mistakes. Edging the box was I think my biggest challenge in my thoughts. This was my solution. Duct tape or washi tape, but I'm going to use the duct tape. I found the gold so I can go all the way around it, and the gold will have that continuity. So here I used scissors to cut it. I did not use it with my teeth, so I got a nice clean cut. I just laid it on the table in front of the box to get the measurement, but where I lay it, I'm going to use my ruler and measure off 1/4 inch so that I can put it on as straight as possible. The end result, when we start attaching all these boxes, I want it to look nice. I don't want it to look sloppy or misdone. So I think taking a few minutes to measure how far in it will go will definitely add to the quality of the end result. I just took my time, matched that up to my measurements, laid that in, and then slowly brought it around and folded it and made it stick neatly. And here we have an edging I'm super happy with. The whole box is done. I just continued that process. I'm loving the gold choice for the Ever After High. Think of all the different duct tapes you could use if you were doing Monster High or Barbie. Endless ideas. Making the windows. As you can see, I did a lot of front end work, and it's all taken quite a few weeks to come together. But for my continuity, I'm enjoying the way these are all going to be the same. Here I painted all of these, obviously left my thumb there, painted around it, wait till it dries, and then I finished painting that. These are wood pieces, and I think they were $1 in my budget. I like the shape. Of course, I was being lazy by buying those, but here you can use cardboard and make exactly the same thing. It's 3 inches by 3 inches. I just measured it, cut it around, and now I have a cardboard thing to work with. Cost $0. The beauty of the cardboard is you can make whatever shape you want, but the background still needs to look like a sky. So let me show you how I did that. I, of course, painted them all with a medium blue, and then I take a lighter blue and a darker blue of any color you prefer. You can even have a purple background, and I just blend them quickly. Acrylics dry fast, so you have to work a little bit fast, but it's manageable with this size. There's no right or wrong way to do it, besides if you're having this background, which is all supposed to supposedly be the same sky. Of course, you want them to have a little bit of continuous same colors. So I just take the 3 and play with them and blend them till they look the way I want them to. You can make your sky, of course, darker or lighter, or whichever way you choose. In this clip, I did 3, and I think it took about a minute once I had the base coat on. So I'm kind of leaving this here intact so you can visualize and see exactly how to work those colors. Those look really good, right? So you're thinking, yeah, cardboard's not going to look as good. Well, did you notice there was a cardboard one right there? Of course, what's the challenge of cardboard? The edges look terrible. Get out your glue gun and fill it in. Make it smooth. Make it a line, and then you'll barely notice. This tip works in handy for anything you might build with cardboard. This is an excellent, easy, and fast drying way of making cardboard edges not look like cardboard anymore. I just continue using that process to go around the entire area that needs to be filled on the edges. Keep this tip in mind because I am going to use this same thing for a few more things in this dorm room, and it's good for you for later and using on other projects. Can it look good? Well, let's twist it around. I already pre-did the other 2 sides, and I guess it's for you to decide. Matching them up together, the $1 piece of board next to the $0 piece of cardboard. Either would work. So let's get on to the lines now. I found the best way to do this and save me time in measuring was to do the measuring once and make a pattern. All I did was trace the size out I have, which in my case is 3 inch by 3 inch. Cut that in half with my fraction math, of course, and then made my lines perfectly in the center with a marker, copying what I'm going to do. That's a whole lot of words for what you can see what I'm doing. But in case anybody's in a different language, maybe they can figure it out and by the visuals copy what I'm doing if it interests them. This again has worked out perfect for my continuity with making all these windows be the same. A tidbit here with my marker, especially for the young ones, you can't just make a line. The marker has about 1/4 of an inch broadness to it. So when I lay my ruler down to match up, I want to make sure I don't put it in the middle of my marks, but off to the side. So I'm absolutely positive I can try my best to get this line straight down the center. And then it's just a simple matter of lining it up and tracing it. And of course, I did 30 of these. When I pull my ruler up, I'm going to do it up, not scrape, because sometimes the marker, depending on what you use, sticks to it. So I made sure I pulled that up and then wiped it on my towel so I wouldn't transfer any other marker marks onto what I was working on. Then, of course, I just flipped that around, continued to use my pattern. As I said, this made things a heck of a lot easier. Looks good. Now we'll compare it to the other one, because now I have to do the edgings. And what I am going to do, or have done, is I used the other side of the marker, the thinner stroke on it, and that's only like 1/8 of an inch. So I'm just measuring this up. This one I'm kind of more doing by eyeball, checking it out, making sure it looks even on both sides, and then just proceed with the very tedious task of going around each and every square over and over again 30 times. It was not a fun job, but I am ecstatic with the results and how it's going to look. So it was definitely worth the effort. And that happened a lot in the Big Monster High Doll house. There was projects that were horrible, but they had to be done, just like this one. After I finished doing all 4 sides, then I had to work on the edges to give it proper depth without looking not completed. I like when things look completed. Very simply took the marker and brushed it on the edges of each edge. That's pretty slick. And finished that all up all the way around. As you can see here, it really doesn't take a lot of time, but it's definitely worth the effect in the end. Of course, when I'm hanging these, I'm going to make sure that the sky is going left and right the right way. Here's our cardboard variation. Works out well. Took a little more effort to push the marker into the edge because it was a little bumpy, but in the end, even when I hung it, it looks really good. Awesome. Possum. Now I'm making valances. You can use popsicle sticks or rods, whichever you prefer for this. I wanted a thicker one, so of course I used the tongue depressors. They're quite simple. Tongue depressor, and stick a little heart embellishment I bought out of wood onto each side, and they were built. Done. Easy. Next, all that was needed is the paint, which I have these. I'll use the yellow as a base coat to get coverage, then use my gold, and then use my glitter to get thoroughness. If you want a $0 variation of this same thing, I just cut a piece of cardboard 6 inches wide, and then did the same treatment I did on the windows on the edges to make it look complete and get rid of the cardboard look. Then I took a piece of paper, folded it in half, made a half heart, cut it out, made a little pattern, and I was able to make a little heart out of cardboard that looked just as good as the tongue depressors. Of course, I had to put the glue on every little edge. It's definitely workable for a small budget. I got all the painting done. That was nice to sit and watch a show. Use that yellow as a base coat, use the gold, and then put the glitter on top. It worked out really well. Then I have my cardboard $0 variation. This worked out well too. The paint took a little bit longer to dry, but it worked out good. Here's the painter and me using a tester strip to see how many coats I needed to get the look I wanted. The yellow the yellow base coat will probably save you approximately 2 coats of paint if you like it solid. Here's some other variations. Of course, mine was just an easy on the budget. If you're going to town or you have extra embellishments around, you can obviously use anything as the finial. And here I am just showing some visuals on other ideas for finials. Have fun with that one. So many options to go with each character if you don't want to go with the continuity idea. So let's make some drapes. This is all no-sew with the help of this awesome product, Fray Check, which I got at the fabric store. You just put it itsy bitsy little bit all the way across your edges, your raw edges, and that stuff will not fray. I can't stress how awesome that is. For this purpose, I'm going to do 2 times the width of the panel. Real life is 3 times to make it look really thick and solid. Depending on what material you use, it depends on how it's going to work out. I've done this one with ironing. The most important step is the edges being turned over. Have a look at this picture to see what I mean. By flipping those raw edges or even sewn edges back, it's just going to make the end product look really good. And then they're hidden. Of course, like I said, I ironed to show how I pinch it together, but you don't have to do that. If you have a flowing fabric such as this, an old leftover shirt, it only comes into play that you're going to take the edges and fold them back again, and that will make your end product look good no matter which fabric you use. Trust me when I say it's a detail that works out really well. If you don't have ribbons for a tieback, here's a super simple idea that is easy to make. No sew, just use glue. I simply folded it like that, and then I will attach it like that in a curl, and here we have a beautiful little tieback. You don't have to iron that, it just made it easy for visuals here. At this point, I'm just making sure the width of my drape matches up to the window in the middle, so I'm not covering it too much. Of course, I want to show that window as a point. Oh, there's Panda next to me. Easy as pie. Once I get that, I'm going to just glue that on, not reaching the top of the valance. When I make the other panel, I'm going to make sure that I pinch in the opposite direction so that they both look correct when they're hung up. Then I will take my glue and just put a little dab on each of the pinches. Now, had I been using a flowy fabric, I would not have had to do all this ironing, and I would have just done that on the actual valance at about 1/4 of an inch per pinch. It actually gets easy after you get the hang of it. I probably should have cut a square of this to make it easier for a showing. I just quickly wanted to show you with a flowing fabric, pinch like this, put a dab of glue with each pinch, and that makes a quicker and easier drape. See how I show as I go along? And then of course at your end, make sure you leave enough to fold over the raw edge on both sides, and then you have a super easy drape with a flowy fabric. Here I have slid my little tiebacks on just to show how they work. You can attach them to the back of the drape or right to the wall, whichever you decide. I also have this little piece of ribbon trim to show. You don't have to make the tieback. You can obviously have the endless ideas that you can buy in ribbon and trim. Checking out the bottom with that fray check is really good. It keeps it nice and clean. But if you're doing pleats and you want it to really stay in well and not come undone, you can use a little bit of glue. The trick is don't press hard. Like the towels I've made for the other stuff, the other dollhouse, you want to pinch very lightly and use very little, just enough to hold it in place. I'm setting those drapes away on the side while I make some doors out of cardboard and paper. I think my words are going to sound confusing on this particular portion, so I hope the picture drawings help explain it better. Cardboard on the back, paper on the front, and an edging on the sides is the eventual thing this will be. I'm showing this on the white piece of paper, but I did do it on the brown I bought in my supplies. Now, as for height, I did 10 3/4. That is a little bit smaller than the dolls, but I had to accommodate a little bit for the top of the walls and where the crown will be. Otherwise, I was able to get 4 doors out of one 12 by 12 sheet at 3 inches wide each of the doors. Now, I happen to have a guillotine cutter from my scrapbooking, and that certainly made my cutting a whole lot easier. But if you don't have it, you can use a ruler. If you're young, with parents' permission, a craft knife, and you can just cut lines using your ruler to get it as straight as possible. Otherwise, you're going to have to use scissors, which is going to hurt your hands. But if you do a few a day or one a week, that should work out okay. You'll end up with pieces of paper like this. You could technically use this on its own and be done with it if you just wanted a simple thing that looks like a door. I want a little dimension, so that's why I'm going further in my plan. Remember those pieces in part 1 that we cut off the boxes, those flaps? Well, here we have it. I am using some of those. I'm also collecting other boxes to have extra cardboard just in case I need it. So here I got 2 doors out of each flap because the measurement is pretty much the same. This 12 by 12 is fabulous. I matched it up and did the same 10 3/4. I cut them 3 inches wide. What I did in an advanced set is I only used the right side with the clean side, and I took away the left side, which was the raw cut from the box and was a little crooked on my part. So I put those aside really to use as a shim, and then I only used the right side, which was cut much neater on both sides. So then I ended up with one of these for each door. I marked right here at 6 inches up and 1/4 of an inch in to mark where my doorknob is going to be. So those again are consistent with all the doors throughout the door rooms. When I cut off all those 1 1/4 pieces, I set them on the side and keep them in case I need them for something else. Now for a 0 option, I did go ahead and use my same technique with the glue gun, hot glue I mean, and a base coat of something dark to make a door out of cardboard without paper and at a $0 cost. So now I have to get this paper on to this cardboard in a neat way. Of course, when you're doing this many, they're not all going to be perfect. So what I did is I just worked on 2 at a time for the opposing rooms. So visually they would look the same. And I would match them up, and I actually marked them on the back A, B, C, and D to be sure that I kept them together. So getting it on, very similar to doing the edges of the room walls. I just put a little bit around the edge and kept it neat. I most importantly made sure the bottom was all the way to the bottom. I laid that paper on top carefully, making sure I don't get the glue all over the place. Just making sure it's leveled out, it's matching, it's looking good. And most important was, again, the bottom. Being sure the bottom was all the way to the bottom, since that's going to touch our floor and actually show. The rest is going to be covered. Again, don't press too hard as you press the glue out and you'll have bigger and worse dimples. Now I'm using my very inexpensive washi tape. I'm not even sure how you say that. I might be saying it wrong. And I'm going to edge out the top and sides to make it look like it has door trim by your eye, even though it doesn't. So I take my first sheet, cut it, and I mostly have done this by eye. Look on the front, look on the back, make sure it's even, and then press it down. I cut off my edges here on the top, and this was the exact order I did every single one, just because I wanted my overlaps to be good. And then I took the side, I cut another piece just as wide or as tall as the door and cut it in an angle when it meets the top. It doesn't make a very big difference, but to me, I thought it wouldn't snag more, and it would just lay better. And that did end up working out when I flipped it around. So again, I'm just matching it up. I'm doing most of this by eye. This stuff is very easy to pull off the paper. So it was actually just a fluke that I bought it for this purpose, and it worked out really well. Again, I'll just flip that over when I get it nice and even, make sure it looks nice on the front, press it down so it's firm, and then snip off my ends. It's now been about a week since I actually did these doors, and having used this product for the first time, it is not coming off or lifting. So I'm pretty impressed with this new thing. I'll have to incorporate this in other projects. And here I will just continue and do the other side exactly the same. At this point, I hope you're not bored, but you may be very bored with this. But I thought I would include every single part. So this is the ultimate in how I did it project and how I did every step of the way. So please bear with me or hit the fast forward button if you're finding obviously any of these parts boring. To some who are not very crafty, it is my hope that putting all this in is very, very handy for you to know that these are really easy and you can do it and you can work it out. This was yet another easy project to do while watching a TV show. Here's the washi tape, and there's the measurements and how much is in it. I believe it was $3.99, and I was able to get 14 doors out of one roll. Very, very cost effective here. Super happy with these results. So now we have to get on to doing doorknobs. Of course, I'm working with 2 at one time, so I want to be absolutely sure the 2 that are matching together match. Because of anything that's most important to make this look realistic in this dorm room theme, this would be it. Of course, if you aren't doing the dorm room theme, you don't have to worry about that one bit. this is how I'm doing it. So I took my little template here and I made a pattern just to give me something to help me match these up. Inevitably, I had to hold them together to make them match up perfectly. Beyond this, there's no perfect way of doing it, so this is how I did it. Held them together between my pattern and my ruler by looking at how I had framed it out with the washi tape. I kind of had to eyeball it a little bit on top of all this, and I made my marks to where I was going to put my beads. Remember those beads from the budgeting and supply video? I got an entire strand that does all these doors, so this is really cost effective. And here, just showing you, put the teeniest bit of glue on it. The best way to make your stuff look good with hot glue is to not let it show. I learned that in scrapbooking. Do not show your glue. So if you just carefully dab a little bit on, be ready because you got to move fast. Obviously it dries fast when you're only using a little. Go in a little circle like that so you don't get too much filament. Even if you do, it can be fixed. And then set it on your spot ever so gently. Press, kind of just let it melt into where it's supposed to be. And then it looks super duper wonderful and awesome. I love the way that looked. It was a little bit more of a challenge, obviously, to match up the other one. Now all I have to do is put a little monogram on the door. And I think we got a neat looking door for what turned out to be a super low price. When that door was dry, I then used my tweezers to get the filament off of it. So here we have our door. I did out a piece of cardboard. I did the same edging I did on the window. Then I used a marker just like I did on the window to make an edge. And just because I wanted to have a little bit of pizzazz, I put a little bit of glitter paint on top of the trim, just to make it look a little extra special. So if we go to a lower budget option, usually people have beads around, so you do the same process. Just use this kind of bead that has a hole in it. The same way, set it down ever so gently, let it melt into its spot, only guide it. And it doesn't take very long to dry. So you might think, oh, but now we got a hole in it. I did this on the RV, the Monster High RV, using this same technique. And I just dribbled a little bit of hot glue into the hole. You just got to press ever so gently, control it, do the swirl around, get your finger in there and level it out. It's not too hot because it's only a little bit and it's on the edge. And then when you're done and it's dry, you can just take a little dab of paint and cover up that hot glue, matching or separate, and you have a perfect door for next to nothing. My front end work is done, and I'm super happy that I can just grab that stuff as I need it when I want to start making these rooms. Now here, I took those measurements from the beginning of the video, and I'm being consistent, and I mark them with my red marker again, so that when I set the door in place and the window, I'm going to be sure I at least try, excuse me, to get them all in the same spot. This time is very time well spent to make sure they look halfway decent when you're going for such a continuous and continuity style. Here is a cool insider tip to have working time while you're using hot glue. Don't use all hot glue. Use some of the regular glue, and then you're only going to use the hot glue and need less to place it and hold it in place while the regular glue dries. I did this a ton in the Monster High dollhouse, even with wood pieces. So with a little bit of hot glue, less than you'd have to do if you had to glue that hole back, I can quickly go onto that window and set that in place and not have to worry about it getting dry in certain areas and not sticking in other areas. Here now, when the window is on, it's that quick. The hot glue has held it in place, and the wet glue will obviously dry and keep it in place. I sure hope that makes sense. So I'm going to use that same process for my door. I think this gives you a better visual. If you had to put hot glue over that entire door, by the time you got to the bottom of it, all your glue on the top, hot glue, would be dried and then it doesn't stick well. So here I've done the same thing. Lots of wet glue, little bit of hot glue, line it up, get it just perfect. My working time is faster while it's wet. I can set it in place, and now we have a door that is on where it should be. The hot glue holds it, and the wet glue will be dried and make it super secure in about an hour when it is fully cured. I love this tip. Best tip I can offer you is probably that one which I just told you. Voila! And that only took about a minute to attach the door and the window. Baseboard and crown molding using ribbon trim. It gets frayed at the edge, so here is another helpful tip that I use many times. I go on the back and then I put a little bit of hot glue on it to smooth it out and kind of hold the fibers in place. And then when it dries, then I can cut it off and I don't have to worry about it unraveling, especially while I'm working on it. This is a really nice handy dandy tip. There's a second part to this if you want to really do the advanced way of making it look complete. But here it is now at this point, and I can begin putting it on without worrying about frays. I use that same technique before I cut this piece of trim to fit behind that tape. Now I'll go and use my hot glue to glue the piece down that has a nice perfect edge which matches up without all that fraying. I sure hope that one made sense because that makes it look really professional. Here's the advanced step. I just take a puffy paint. Remember in my materials I just bought one that closely matches the trim a little bit. Here I'm going to take the end and just put a little bit of puffy paint on the very end, and now I've made a top notch end of this trim, and I've protected it so if you're sticking your hands in there and your hands or your wrist would be sliding if you were playing in this room, you won't snag that and unravel it that way. Obviously now I have to glue all the rest for the bottom and the top. There is no easy way to do this besides wrestling with the box. I will tell you this though, using the box in your hand makes this a heck of a lot easier. When I ended this piece of trim, I put a little black puffy paint at the end to make this one look really good while it ended as well. Of course, this section was optional, but I am really glad I did it this way. I'm excited to see that baseboard at the bottom. Here's an extra little tip. I use tweezers to pull out my filaments. It just helps a lot and grabs the whole thing. Of course, waiting until it's dry. I'm in no rush to do that. And then when you have a thin trim like this where the glue might come through, I just take a coordinating marker, Sharpie, and cover up the spots that are showing. And then your eye looks like you're a perfect hot gluer. You're not really. You're just hiding anything that might be coming through. I'm super delighted with that baseboard especially. I would highly suggest that because it looks good. Now down here that gap was a little bit bigger than I liked, so I just took my puffy paint again. This stuff is magical. I tell anyone invest in 1 bottle per week because this thing fixes so much stuff. So I just filled in my gap all the way around and it looks fantastic. Finally, let's put on these drapes. I made some marks on the back at my half marks just to give me a little direction to help me get it in the middle because I can't really measure while I'm working with hot glue. This is really simple. The hard work's all been done. I don't use the wet glue. I just put the hot glue on, glob it on thick and glob it on fast, and then set it in place. That is where my marks are really going to help me be able to place this in by eye to make it look nice and straight. Pretty much as simple as this. I have those awful glue sticks that are slippery and that made me have to push it off my chin. All in the eye right here. Just making sure there it is, it's in place. I'm happy with how it looks, so I'll press it in. And that is pretty much done. I got enough room up there for some trim. I got some space. I think it's starting to look like a room. What do you think? Thickness of the valance and the material made this come on and give it some more dimension. I love that. Now I just need to put on the tiebacks by gluing them to the wall. When using Mod Podge for the floor, don't be afraid. It will ripple, but then it will lay flat after it's dried. Here we have a box that has become a room. I don't know about you, but I'm feeling pretty content here that this cardboard box does not look like a cardboard box anymore. It looks like a doll room. and I am so excited. When I bring over Blondie to be next to it, I'm ecstatic. I can't even tell you. And I hope this all helps you. So all she needs now is a bed. For each other character bed, I will show that in the individual videos of each doll as we move along. As for this one in my example room, I also switched to Blondie because I did want to show how you really could make all of this out of cardboard and on the low range of the budget and with the materials I showed you in part 2. I began making my bedding set with the material I planned in part 2 as well, and here I show you the full range of all the techniques I've shown you to make the bed out of cardboard using the glue gun to fill in the edges. I also threw some primer on the hot glue just so it would paint and be a little more durable. That part is optional. I base coated with a cream before I put on the yellow, and now I'm making my comforter. If you'd like to see how to make this full bedding set, check the link down below as I have detailed instructions on how to make that too. The two-sided bedding set is coming along great. I'm just working on the pillows. I love the interchanging of all that. It makes it so much more fun for redecorating. Do you see my little mistake in there? Oh my god, I didn't realize it until later. Here I began my individualized side table for Blondie out of cardboard. That bed skirt you see was the same technique I used for the tiebacks. I just made it longer, did not put it into a curl, and obviously just glued it to the side. Here's some little extras, such as the rug was left over from Blood Goods, little embellishments. And now here we have the room, all put together, very simple. Do you see my theme yet now that I went for Blondie? I just did her simply by her fairy tale. Gracie figured it out really fast. The door, window, and valance is all from the examples I showed on the low range. And as you can see, I fixed my mistake. Oh my god, I put it up and I was staring at it. It was the last thing. I was so excited, thought I was done, and went, oh my god, wrong letter. So I had to quickly whip that up and change it. The room looks fabulous. I'm super happy with it. Going by the budgeting, materials, and supplies, I think this room probably went for a total cost of about $10. And that's really only because I used the fabric that I had bought and the little teddy bear and stuff that I did already have, but if you had to buy that, that would bring your cost up a little bit. But in essence, this room, huge success. Tell me what you think. My theme was too hot, too cold, just right. Other words, small, medium, and large. A last little detail, of course, when we did the boxes in a row up high, they were uneven, so now we need a shim. I'm going to do it on the bottom and the top. Remember, I flapped that back, so I'm going to take the piece we cut off, cut it in half. You don't need the whole thing. Cut it in half so I can use one for the bottom, one for the top, or the sides, because I do think I'm going to do it with the flaps that went to the side too. I have all my leftovers from, I used the door, or you can cut them yourself. This one I'm going to do pretty simple, hot glue. I did put the wet glue in the middle just because the wet glue is cheaper than the hot glue and it has lots of time to dry. So I just glued one on the bottom, one on the top. Good to go. If you watched our intro video, then you know we have every single doll to date of the signatures for the Ever After High, and I have my work cut out for me. But let me tell you, doing all that front end work is going to make this go by really smooth. I'm so stoked. Keep an eye out for part 4 and the last step in our series here for Ever After High dorm room building. It's going to take me, I think, to have at least 8 rooms complete before I can start putting together the boxes and figuring out how I'm going to use the mechanics to make that happen. This is our space, and I'm in.